Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm Reverend Jude Geiger, the Minister for Community Engagement here at Community Church, and I welcome you all on behalf of our ministry team, our staff, and all our lay leaders. It is good to be together both in person and online. Community Church is a multiracial, multicultural, multi-generational congregation with a vision and commitment to build a world grounded in equity and inclusion. Our director of music, Jerry Brown, is under the weather this morning, so on very short notice, our own Joel Mandelbaum is gratefully filling in. Thank you, Joel. He is working with our wonderful choir. Also with me today is Brother Zachary Stevens-Walter, our chaplain for pastoral care, and Reverend Peggy Clarke, our senior minister. Darnell White, our musician in residence, is on a national tour and will return to us in December. Community Church is in transition. We have sold our church building and are in the process of finding another in this neighborhood. We are guests here at the Church of the Incarnation in the meantime, for which we are also grateful. And even if this beautiful space isn't necessarily perfectly reflective of our theology. Children are always welcome during the worship. Feel free to move around the space or to move back and forth to join programming happening upstairs in the loft. The sounds of babies crying or children fidgeting is a beautiful part of being in community. Masks are optional and of course encouraged. We ask that everyone be respectful of each other's decisions and needs for personal space. Today's service is called Love, Hope, and Ferocity. Please rise in body and or in spirit, and let's sing together our opening hymn, I Know I Can, in the Teal Hymnal, number 1015.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It's so good to see you all. And again, can I say thank you to Joel? It's so good to know that even though Jerry is so incredibly talented, that when he's not here, we have choices. I also want to point out that because the program changed at the last minute, you'll notice that a few things are different. After the pastoral prayer, we're not going to have music, and our closing hymn will be Spirit of Life. today, but we'll remind you as we go. And so, in this Sunday before Election Day, in this very interesting American moment, let us begin our worship. Come into this space we share, this space in between. We are sharing the in-between space, this meantime, this bated breath that sits between what was and what will be. Come, we have nowhere else to be, nothing else to do, but to breathe the anticipation of whatever is to come. Into this pregnant pause, we will find our worship together. Please rise in body or in spirit as we light our chalice.
We light this candle, the flame of our heritage. May it ignite hope in our lives, in our community, and in the world. Please join me as well for our unison affirmation. Unto the Church Universal, which is the depository of all ancient wisdom and the school of all modern thought, which recognizes in all prophets a harmony, in all scriptures a unity, and through all dispensations a continuity, which abjures all that separates and divides, and always magnifies humanity and peace, which seeks truth in freedom, justice in love, an individual discipline in social duty, and which shall make of all persons one beloved community. Unto this church and unto all its members, known and unknown throughout the world, we pledge the allegiance of our hands and hearts. You may be seated for the doxology.
We are gathered on the unceded land of the Lenape peoples. We acknowledge the Lenape community, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. It is the time in our service of coming together to make a joyful noise and greet our neighbors. From the sound of joyful noise to the sound of a chime that will bring us into silence, knowing that with all the wiggles and coughs and sneezes of the world. It's not about the perfection of silence, but the intention. Please join with me now in a spirit of prayer. Spirit of community, God of many names, love abounding. We each come here for different reasons. To connect once more with friends well known, to meet new folks along the way, to be less alone in a city that is both very full and sometimes very isolating amidst the bustle, and especially in these times of pandemic. Some of us are tired, dedicated to the busyness of our work week, or struggling to find a job, stressed from the tests and the homework and the deadlines. We gather to pause between the silence and the joy of this hour, hoping to be renewed in spirit and in mind, to be able to appreciate the small wonders of the moments between our obligations. We gather as a community to build loving friendships, to seek justice in our world, to grow our souls, to nurture compassion with every step, as best we can. And we pray for those among us living with illness, for those recovering in a hospital bed, for their family and friends who wish they could ease their burden. May they find healing where it is possible, peace of mind where it is not, and feel the love that ever surrounds them. Mother of compassion, help us to weave real connections in this house of hope, to build community within our walls and beyond, to always welcome the stranger wherever they are on their life's journey, and allow ourselves to be changed with every new soul that enters our religious home. In building our community, in growing our spirits, we become the stewards of our faith.
As mentioned, there will not be a musical selection at this point. I will share a reading by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, excerpted from a speech delivered in 1986 at Stanford University. Dear friends, let's not kid ourselves. In a situation of injustice and oppression, there can be no neutrality. You have to take sides. You have to say, am I on the side of justice or am I on the side of injustice? When an elephant is sitting on the tail of a mouse and you say, I am neutral, the mouse is not going to be particularly pleased about your neutrality. You have already made a decision. You have decided to be on the side of the powerful, of the elephant. There is no neutrality.
Lauren Boebert, the Republican Congresswoman, asked a crowd at a campaign event in June, "How many AR-15s do you think Jesus had?" Her answer, "Well, he didn't have enough to keep his government from killing him." Lauren Boebert is running for a second term in Congress. Doug Mastriano does most of his campaigning on Gab, a far-right social media site that caters to white supremacists. When asked for a comment about that from the New York Times, he said, "I only speak to Christian news outlets." Doug Mastriano is running for governor of Pennsylvania. Christina Caramo, a community college professor, said, "Evolution is one of the biggest frauds that has ever been perpetrated on us." But now she thinks the 2020 election an even bigger fraud. Caramo is running for Secretary of State, the position that oversees elections. J.R. Majewski, a follower of QAnon, said he wants to, quote, abolish all unconstitutional three-letter agencies, including the CIA. He has said he's willing to fight a civil war, and included in a campaign video images of himself carrying a rifle, saying he'll, quote, do whatever it takes. Majewski is running for U.S. Congress. Dr. Oz tweeted, quote, "For centuries we've used astrological signs to examine our personality and how we interact with those around us. However, these signs may reveal a great deal about our health as well." Dr. Oz is running for United States Senate. John Gibbs has argued that, quote, "women do not possess the characteristics necessary to govern," and said men are smarter than women because they are, quote, "likely to think more logically about broad abstract ideas without relying on emotion." John Gibbs is the Republican candidate for Congress in Michigan. Believing in universal salvation, knowing that all people are loved, that everyone has worth and is deserving of dignity, does not mean that every idea is worthy or that all behaviors should be forgiven. We are facing a crisis of democracy, a crisis of truth-telling, and I'm here today to remind us that our faith calls us to speak truth to power, living in compassion and the clarity of love. On the evening of Friday, August 11, 2017, thousands of people showed up in Charlottesville, Virginia, to protest the removal of a statue of General Robert E. Lee, the Confederate leader. The rally was populated by self-proclaimed white nationalists, neo-Nazis, Klansmen, and far-right militia, many of whom were carrying weapons, Confederate symbols, and Trump flags while chanting racist and anti-Semitic slogans. The visual was chilling. Violence seemed inevitable. The rally went through the night, and the next morning the governor declared a state of emergency. 30 people were injured before a self-identified white nationalist drove his car into a crowd of counter-protesters, killing a young woman. President Trump's initial response was tepid, followed up a few days later with his now infamous line, "There were fine people on both sides." For many Americans, that line was stunning. It was unforgivable. These are not fine people. When you carry torches through the streets chanting, "Jews will not replace us," you've proven yourself less than fine. As much as we reject this particular instance, though, it seems to me religious people generally like both-sidism. We see ourselves as being balanced. spiritually mature enough to recognize the value of every person's perspective and experience. As a minister, with a degree in peace studies and years of practice in nonviolent conflict resolution, I've preached often on just this challenge, imploring all of us to embrace the whole person and reject our impulses toward division. Negotiation is the first step when confronting conflict, and the best negotiators find ways to respect all the people involved, find their humanity, learn their story, help them to see the fullness of the person or people they call other. And the reality is, in many situations, this is all you need. People often end up closer than they were before the conflict after going through a process of hearing each other. I like preaching both-sidism, and congregations like hearing it. It helps our anger subside and feels like it can bring us into alignment with, everything. In a covenanted community, a congregation, for instance, where people have chosen to be together, to live into a common vision and work for a shared mission, we always start with conversation. We talk to each other. We ask why people did what they did. We also talk about harm done. We listen to learn all those things we didn't know. We tell our stories. We seek common ground. When both or all parties are willing to participate in the process, it brings healing. There's the possibility of restoration through intentional listening. It's how healthy communities function. In a community of any size, there are ways we have to be together, some levels of forgiveness, of kindness, and generosity. And when a person or group betrays our shared values or creates harm, there's a need for accountability. Living in covenant means calling each other back in, and conversations are a first step. But I think we confuse this kind of negotiation and compromise with the idea that everyone is right. I mean, certainly those situations exist, and seeking common ground is wonderful, but there are many times in life and history when one side is wrong and the harm being done has to stop. For instance, two spouses might have an argument and later find ways to remember they love each other and seek forgiveness. But if one spouse is beating another, there is no compromise. There's a right and a wrong. Using propaganda to convince the public that an election was stolen is wrong. Stopping teachers from educating students on uncomfortable truths about race in this country is wrong. Refusing actions that will slow climate change is wrong. Protecting corporations while endangering people is wrong. Denying people reproductive freedom and the right to choose their own health care is wrong. And sometimes there is no compromise. There is a right and a wrong. Sustainable community requires knowing the difference. More than that, it requires that everyone get involved, that there are no bystanders. We're in the middle of election season with 2 days left for each of us to cast our ballots. Year after year, it feels like every election is more important than the last, that we're confronting critical issues with long-lasting consequences, that everyone needs to stand up and be heard, or too much will be lost. And this year is no different. 71%. According to a recent New York Times Siena poll, 71% of all voters said democracy is at risk. But only 7% of them identified that as a priority. To quote the report, voters overwhelmingly believe American democracy is under threat, but seem remarkably apathetic about that danger. In Tuesday's election, democracy itself is on the ballot. Questioning election integrity degrades faith in the system until free and fair elections are no longer our means of choosing our own government. Refusing to abide the majority vote, casting doubt on the process, and not allowing the transfer of power all happen in authoritarian regimes. And yet, 28% of the secretaries of state running are election deniers. These are the people with the power to determine how elections are run and how ballots are counted in each state. 21% of governors running, 40% of people running for the House, 24% running for the Senate, all believe that President Biden stole the election and should not be in office. And 2 months from now, there's a high probability that 131 election deniers will be in Congress. I'm sorry, that's just new candidates. There are even more already there. So with 209 million adults in the United States, 13 million of them believe force is justified to restore former President Trump to office. I'm going to say that again. 13 million of 209, 13 million Americans believe they have to resort to force, physical violence, to restore former President Trump, who they believe was illegally removed from office after a corrupted election process. And here's the number that alarms me. Another 40 million Americans aren't sure, maybe yes, maybe no, on the use of force to put Trump back in office. On any other political goals, 23% of Americans neither agree nor disagree when asked if force is necessary. In other words, 1/4 of our population can go either way on whether or not force is necessary to achieve any political goal. So why is that important? Because you don't need a majority of people on your side to make something happen, even something horrific. You just need enough people not to care. Nearly 1/4 of us are ambivalent about the use of force. People see democracy in peril, but we don't care. Or we feel powerless to change it. The system feels so big. We have a culture of protest, but nothing seems to change. All the predictions made about climate change are coming true. We're drilling more now than we were a year ago. People are throwing soup on famous works of art. They're chaining themselves across streets, across train tracks. People are doing everything they can possibly think to do to get our attention without any discernible change. And it's no wonder that apathy is setting in, but that's when things get dangerous. We have to keep vigil to stop the apathy from letting us drift to sleep. Optimism tells me things are going to be great, that everything's going to work out just fine, but I am not feeling optimistic. Hope, on the other hand, tells me that things might be great, that things might work out, but there's a lack of guarantee, and that lack of guarantee requires that I get involved. Hope is unsure and therefore inspirational. It's a prompt to become active. And I do feel hopeful. And frankly, hope is my kind of faith. I don't believe in a God who's going to make everything okay. I don't have faith in a sugar daddy in the sky who has all the power and forethought and can guarantee the right outcomes. For me, there is no anticipated intervention from a transcendent God who bends to my will. Instead, my faith tells me that God, that ever-present power of love, is calling me to action, not the other way around. Hope engages me, engages all of us. It doesn't rely on the passivity of the assumption that everything happens for a reason or everything works out well in the end. I am fully aware that bad things happen to good people. And that's why I am a person of hope. My faith tells me to get involved, even if I want everything to work out well in the end. If that's what I want, I had better get busy to make it happen. We are here to be a religious voice for truth in a time when truth is under attack. We're here to be a beacon for freedom when the freedoms we value are seriously at risk. We're here to be hands of love in the world when love is so desperately needed. We're here to live the values of human worth and dignity, celebration of diversity, integrity, free inquiry, and community inside our congregation and out in the world. This is the work of our time. Democracy and the freedoms and access it guarantees, the very political system that serves as the context for our lives, is at risk. Women have already lost their reproductive freedom in parts of the country, and while that trend spreads, a radical activist court is deciding if diversity has value and whether limiting representation for communities of color can be legally justified. As a group, religious liberals, and political liberals, I suspect, like compromise. We want to negotiate. We want to find middle ground. We work together for solutions. We have to recognize when compromise is inappropriate and negotiation fatal. So I don't believe in hell. I don't believe evil has a voice or a body, but I do know that people have the capacity for horrible things, and historically, they get away with it because most people don't care enough to stop them. This week, we're going to pray with our feet. We'll show up at voting booths and put our faith into action, do what's in front of us to do. The good news is, if we want a better future, it's up to us to create it. The bad news is, if we want a better future, it's up to us to create it. This system depends on its citizens to be energized and engaged. If we don't want lies, we have to speak truth. If we don't want exclusion, we have to live into our vision for equity and inclusion. And if we don't want hate, we have to gather together with clarity and fortitude to show the world what love in action looks like. Together we're going to sing Spirit of Life, which is number 123 in your gray hymnal.
Life at Community Church is busy, whether we are online or in person. It is our hope that wherever you are, in whatever way you are comfortable engaging in the mission and ministry of this church, we have provided opportunities for you. Please join with us on our ongoing program, Prioritizing Mental Health, held every Monday evening at 7 p.m. by Brother Zachary. On Wednesday, we are holding an event called Musical Memories, sponsored by our church council. All are welcome in our main Zoom room. And all are invited to my own Reverend Jude's second part in a year-long series on history, theology, and polity called Roots to Leaves. The second session is entitled Homegrown Heretics, 19th Century Unitarians and Universalists in the States. We'll meet over Zoom at 11 a.m. on Sunday, November 13th next week. And that room is mine, 212-683-0011. There have been some life-giving circle suppers and lunches and brunches. If you'd like to join one, see me. I'm sure to make sure you get connected. And we are a 7-day church and have programs running every day of the week. You can find more information in the program and on our website. Our ushers now are going to pass a plate for our collection. If you're new here, please let the plate go by you with no pressure to give. We are glad for your presence. All gifts are offered are accepted in gratitude.
Together we will extinguish our chalice. The words are in your program. Knowing how quickly the flame of truth may be extinguished, how easily the chalice of fellowship broken, let us be vigilant in faith, keep peace in our hearts, and make care for one another the watchword of our lives together, so our light goes out everywhere into the world. Our light goes out into the world where healing and hope are needed. Go in peace to love and serve the world and one another. Good to be with you.